For the opening minute, let's explore the Cold War shelter trick that quietly outlasted nearly every other survival method of the era. While most attention went to nuclear blast physics and concrete fortifications, a completely different engineering challenge determined whether a shelter would remain usable after the first week, the first year, or even decades later. Concrete can crack, steel can corrode, ventilation systems can fail, but one threat never stopped attacking. Moisture. Moisture seeped, condensed, infiltrated, and destroyed shelters from the inside out. Yet, during the Cold War, engineers developed a method so subtle and reliable that it still outperforms most modern bunker designs. It didn't rely on technology. It didn't need electricity. And shelters that used it remain structurally sound today, long after more complicated systems have collapsed. This was the layered drainage apron, the combination of perimeter French drains, angled backfill, and moisture-diverting skirts that created a protective zone around underground structures. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked every single day, silently defending bunkers against the slow decay that ruins most underground builds. This approach wasn't improvised or experimental. It came from years of testing in NATO training grounds, Soviet military engineering schools, and civil defense installations where thousands of shelters were evaluated under real-world conditions. When abandoned Cold War bunkers are rediscovered today, dry, stable, and structurally intact, it is usually because they use this old drainage trick correctly. And the beauty of this method is that anyone can apply it, even without building a bunker. Root cellars, storm shelters, off-grid pantries, food storage vaults, and partially buried cabins all benefit from it. Once you understand how it works, you begin to recognize it as the secret backbone of long-lasting underground construction. The Cold War drainage apron worked because it shaped the flow of water before it reached the shelter. Engineers knew that the greatest enemy of underground structures isn't catastrophic flooding, but constant pressure from groundwater and rain infiltration. Water never stops searching for the easiest path, and if that path touches concrete walls, deterioration begins immediately. The drainage apron redirected this path by creating layers of coarse gravel, sand, and angled clay-rich soil that sloped outward, away from the shelter. The idea was not to waterproof the bunker itself, but to keep water moving around it instead of against it. In practice, this meant digging the shelter excavation wider than needed, installing a thick gravel layer around the perimeter, then adding a sloped moisture-diverting skirt of compacted soil that shed water outward. It also included a French drain, an underground trench lined with stone and perforated pipe that carried water downhill to a dry well. By controlling water flow before it touched the shelter's walls, engineers drastically reduced structural stress and internal humidity levels. Modern builders often skip this, placing their concrete walls directly against earth. The result is predictable: moisture intrusion, mold, and structural fatigue. Cold War shelters that used the drainage apron avoided these problems for decades, even in regions with heavy rainfall or snowmelt. The genius of the apron system was that it worked continuously without maintenance. Modern waterproofing membranes, well, they eventually fail. Pumps break, sealants degrade. But the drainage apron used gravity and soil structure, two forces that don't stop working. As long as the perimeter trench stayed clear and the soil slope stayed intact, water never accumulated against the shelter. Moisture pressure remained low, and interior humidity stayed stable. Many Cold War engineers even documented how these shelters aged better over time, because soil compaction increased the apron's effectiveness. Today, this same principle can be applied on a smaller scale. A simple root cellar can benefit enormously from a drainage apron. The steps are straightforward. Excavate at least a foot wider on every side of the intended structure. Fill that gap with 8 to 12 inches of coarse gravel. Lay a perforated drain pipe at the lowest edge, directing it toward a dry pit. Then cover the gravel with compacted soil angled away from the walls. You don't need concrete coatings or expensive vapor barriers. The earth does the work. Homesteaders who adopt this method find that their cellars stay drier, require less ventilation, and maintain temperature far more consistently. In survival shelters, it reduces mold risk and extends the life of stored food and supplies. The trick works because it doesn't fight water. It guides it. The Cold War apron system also provided structural stability that modern builders overlook. When earth presses directly against concrete, the loads shift seasonally, especially in freeze-thaw climates. By surrounding the structure with gravel and layered soil, engineers created a flexible buffer zone. This prevented cracking, reduced wall deformation, and allowed the shelter to float slightly within its excavation. Many Cold War military depots built this way remain structurally sound, despite decades of abandonment and heavy seasonal shifts. Anyone building a partially buried outbuilding, like a root cellar, a storm bunker, or a semi-underground food vault, can still benefit from this stabilizing effect. The gravel layer distributes pressure evenly. The sloped soil layer sheds surface water. The drain pipe carries excess away. Together, they create a long-lasting underground environment with minimal intervention. The enduring lesson of this Cold War technique is that durability comes from shaping the environment, not fighting it. The drainage apron was simple, cheap, and largely invisible, yet it protected shelters better than any mechanical system of the era. By respecting water's natural behavior and guiding it away, Cold War engineers built bunkers that have outlasted high-tech installations built decades later. Structures that failed because their designers assumed technology would compensate for poor fundamentals. For those who value historical engineering with real modern applications, this Cold War trick is one of the most reliable and accessible methods ever developed. It strengthens structures, stabilizes underground climates, and preserves food and supplies far longer than expected. If you want more deep Cold War engineering breakdowns and practical historical insights, be sure to subscribe to In the Beginning and share this guide with others who appreciate knowledge built to last.